From the moment you press the start button, all the way to rescuing the princess, video games have provided players countless adventures over the years. But like every good story, there needs to be something that catches your attention, hooks you in, and prepares you for the challenges ahead. On today's episode of GameSpeak, I would like to go over the strategies and design philosophies of creating introductions for video games, asking questions like, what are some of the key elements used when the player first boots up the game? How long do we have to make a lasting impression? And what methods are used to keep the player engaged? The answers to these questions may surprise you like they did me. So, let's get this show on the road and dive right in. Like walking into a job interview, video game developers have to impress their players by showing them something worthwhile. The two most critical parts of any game that leave a lasting impression on a player's mind are the beginning and end, with the introduction being the most important section as it can make or break the player's decisions to keep playing. On average, it takes players about 15 minutes to decide if they want to continue playing. So depending on the type of game, several strategies are used to keep the player's attention and sway you towards not putting down the controller. Believe it or not, these methods do not start at the first level. Far from it. The timer starts the second the main menu screen pops up. Players subconsciously start making judgments about the game once they see the start menu. So to help build excitement, developers will design their start menus to be incredibly flashy, utilizing thematic resources foreshadowing the experience ahead. Some examples include showing off cool art, dynamic shots of the game's world, dramatic set pieces with character interactions, or even showing off gameplay. When navigating through the game's menu, quick, snappy animations and sound effects are utilized to further enhance these themes. These methods are essential for games with multiple modes, as a stylish yet simple UI helps the player stay amused and get to the game quickly. A player's time needs to be respected when navigating through the menus, so the faster you can get the player to the game, the better. Start menus can be as simple as stylistic pictures with menu options, or you can take it a few steps further and get creative with it. The Persona series is famous for its user interface, and always finds new ways to make its start menus more appealing. My favorite being Persona 5 Royal, where you are placed right in the middle of Shibuya Crossing, and every option takes you to a new spot with the Phantom Thieves interacting with the world. Another incredible example is Quake, where you literally wander around a hub level and select the episode and difficulty you want to play by exploring. The game hasn't truly started, and already the player has a feel for the atmosphere, movement, and what to expect, especially if they choose hard mode, as they have a chance to take damage when selecting this difficulty. It's pure genius. But no matter what strategy the developers decide to use, players should always have a general idea of what they're getting themselves into before they start playing. Start menus are your true first impression. Wow, that was very interesting, Ender. So can we play the game now? No! Let me ask you something. What happens after you select Start Game? The game starts loading. Now, I don't know about you, but I cannot stand loading. Thankfully, just like there are strategies to make start screens more appealing, the same can be done for loading screens. One of the most common tricks you'll see for loading screens is the progress bar. Believe it or not, progress bars give players the illusion that the game is loading faster than it actually is. Other common tricks are showing off art, explaining tips and tricks of the game, or developers can let players get down and dirty a bit earlier by implementing gameplay while the game loads. Bayonetta lets players practice combos in a small battle arena. Sonic Frontiers has interactive tutorials to help learn the game's combat and movement should players be struggling with it. And the Budokai Tenkaichi games take a simpler approach by implementing minigames into their load screens. As technology improved, load times have reduced. But with online games, you're occasionally going to run into the guy whose router is a straight-up microwave. So having gameplay options like practice modes, customization rooms, or even waiting room matches like Overwatch's PvP lobbies, players can stay engaged while they wait to connect to their online matches, making load times seem shorter. At long last, we start playing the game. Introduction of gameplay can boil down into three basic categories: organic, cinematic, and instructional. Organic introductions focus on teaching the player how to play the game based off level design. Games like Mario, Dark Souls, and Celeste each focus on letting the player discover how they function simply by playing the game. Run around, take a risky jump, and find out what damages you without grinding the game to a halt. This is my favorite way to be introduced to a game, as I get most of my satisfaction from learning how the game works at my own pace without having my hand held. The cinematic approach is used more towards story-based RPGs. In this style, a lot of effort goes into keeping the player entertained through cinematography. What the? Cinematography. I'm like, cinnamon roll. Yes. In this style, a lot of effort goes into keeping the player entertained through cinematography and dialogue. Not a whole lot of interaction happens with these types of games in the beginning. The most the player will do is select dialogue options or hit continue at most. Remember, we are trying to make the most out of 15 minutes before the player judges our game. So utilizing camera angles, voice acting, and dynamic action scenes to explain our plot will help keep the player engaged and anticipate the upcoming action when it's their turn to take the wheel. Or you could just give them the option to skip the cutscene entirely. Finally, we have the instructional approach. This is when the game relies solely on tutorials to show you how the game works. This method is usually saved for strategy games like Civilization, Crusader Kings, and other games that involve complex mechanics. However, this could be considered the most difficult approach to introducing gameplay. Josh Beiser writes, "Designing a good tutorial is beyond the scope for this point. But this is a do-or-die moment for many games. There is a critical problem if after a tutorial, the player still doesn't know how your game works. A major fallacy I've seen in the indie space is using outside videos as a substitute for an in-game tutorial. I've said it before, and I'm going to say it again. No one should have to leave your game in order to understand how to play it. And I could not agree more. Now, I'm not saying players should avoid going to other people in the community to learn more about the game and adopt new playstyles. But to Josh's point, a game should be able to teach you its basics from its own devices without the need for players to learn from someone else. These strategies, though incredibly effective, are not the only way to introduce gameplay. There are hybrid methods used all throughout the craft. So I thought it would be fun to examine the first 15 minutes of one of the most iconic games of all time and find out why it still encapsulates many players to this day.
Hey, you're finally awake.
Oh yeah, I felt that anger, and I have no regrets. But seriously, Skyrim is the game we are observing, as it demonstrates aspects of all three strategies previously mentioned, and to this day remains one of the most played games of all time. And for the sake of getting to the game as quickly as possible, I will not be taking the time to customize a character. Now, I will not discredit how the character customization is introduced. I will go into more depth about it in a second, but I want to give Skyrim the best chance of showing off all it does within those 15 minutes, and customizing your character could take between 3 minutes to multiple hours depending on how passionate you are about your character. Okay, with that out of the way, let's get into it. Kicking things off with the start screen, I'm not gonna lie, it's pretty simplistic. However, its lack of visual stimuli is made up for with other elements that aid in its introduction. Starting off with what we can see, there's the carved dragon emblem from the box art, and some looming smoke in the background, followed with the basic highlighted text for our menu options. But whilst looking at this, we also have this banger song playing in the background. This song alone builds up a majority of the hype we are about to encounter. With its rhythmic Nordic chanting, bombastic horns, and catchy melody, this tells to me that what I have to look forward to is worthy of a song this dramatic. This feeling is further enhanced with the sound effect that triggers right when I press play. Before the game starts, we are presented with one of Skyrim's many famous loading screens, revealing a dragon perched over a stone mural. Something I always enjoyed about these load screens is how it lets you examine the asset from any perspective. You can rotate it, blow it up, or shrink it down to examine every inch, making the load time seem like less of a burden and more of an opportunity to take a closer look and admire at what the developers created. Now that we are finally awake, we are immediately placed into a tense situation, being informed that we have been captured alongside prisoners of an ongoing civil war, being carted to our doom. Even though the narrative is grim, I couldn't help but feel calm as I gazed into the lush foliage of Skyrim, wondering what lies beyond those tall mountains in the distance. Eventually, we end up at the Nordic town of Helgen, to then be ordered off the cart, snapping us out of the wonder and reminding us the seriousness of our situation. Once asked who we are, we then create our character. This smooth transition introduces the player to all the colorful races of Tamriel and offers a plethora of customization options to really make the character our own. Everything that has been shown to us at this point has been a very interesting hybrid of cinematic and organic design. Rather than use dynamic camera angles to show off this narrative-heavy situation, Skyrim instead places you right in the perspective of the prisoner, grounding you to the situation and giving you the choice to listen and observe your fellow captives or take in the world around you. Then snaps you right back into the moment when being escorted off the cart. Watch the death of a fleeing captive, then design the character you've been feeling the shoes of up to this point. We have been leaning more on the cinematic side, but that's all about to change, and we are only roughly 5 minutes in. With me pretending to be impatient, I create my basic looking Nord, Subscribe, At this point, all I can do is stand here and wait for my turn on the chopping block. Throughout these moments, we keep hearing ominous roars in the background. And just as we stare death in the face, we discover the source of those odd sounds. The dragon Alduin has arrived. Glaring at us from atop the tower, he lets out a mighty shout, taking control of the sky, commanding it to rain meteors upon the town. We now take control of our character and beeline it to the closest shelter we can find. The more we try to run away, the more we keep getting cut off by the dragon, whilst following anyone that seems to have some idea of what to do. Until we come to our first crossroad decision, choosing between the Empire who imprisoned us but has more allies in the area, or the rebels that treated you like a brother till your near last breath. I went with the same decision I made the first time I played Skyrim and followed Brayloff. Retreating into the tower, we soon have our bindings cut and have free reign over all our characters' options. It is here we learn how to interact with the environment, looting gear off of a Stormcloak's corpse and fitting our character with some basic armor and a war axe. Soon after, we are ambushed by a small troop of Imperial soldiers, including the one that sent you to the block. After a quick revenge, I used the skills I learned recently to start scavenging the guards we defeated in hopes of finding better gear. It is here that I rediscover what drew me to Skyrim, searching whatever I can get my hands on for better stuff. Sure, the combat is a bit floaty, but it's engaging enough to where I can maneuver around enemy strikes to avoid taking damage and sometimes be rewarded with a cool animation. The further we plunge into the dungeon, the more immersed I get with Skyrim's mechanics. I'm constantly fighting enemies, searching every corpse and chest for new gear, and paying close attention to every object I come across, as every set piece in Skyrim has objects you can either collect or manipulate, making the world feel more intricate as I snag loose change from a table or examine a weapon rack for a new shield. With this now organic-focused approach, I've already learned how to make choices, fight enemies, loot interactable objects, and excavate Skyrim by paying close attention to the areas I'm currently exploring. All of this 12 minutes in. During my last 3 minutes, I arrive into the torture chamber and learn about magic as the wizard shocks my comrades in self-defense, and how to acquire new spell tomes by lockpicking my way into a cage with a dead mage wearing magic robes. And stop! It has been 15 minutes. Now, let's do a quick recap. Within the first 15 minutes of Skyrim, I was shown a very simplistic start screen with imagery of dragons accompanied by a badass war chant melody. Loading in, I was able to observe a beautiful 3D model of a dragon, giving me one last glimpse of what's to come. When I finally load in, I was placed in the perspective of an imprisoned character surrounded by captives of war, informing me with some of the game's lore, while simultaneously being able to look around and take in the game's world to admire the atmosphere. To then be dragged back into my dire situation by designing my character and almost get my head chopped off. Once the dragon arrives, I'm given limited control to learn how to move my character by avoiding being burned alive by a giant lizard. Once I'm comfortable with my basic movement, I'm met with my first real choice in the game and rewarded by having all my options being made available in the forms of looting, fighting, inventory management, and the fruits of my exploration. At the very end, I have my interest piqued with the revelation of magic and how to find more rare items by challenging myself to get into places I'm not supposed to be in. Should I have been convinced to keep playing after these short 15 minutes, I'll be granted with the full map of Skyrim as my playground, revealed to me with a lush forest with an intriguing looking temple on the face of a mountain, just 5 minutes later. Now that's how you introduce a game! So whatever route you choose, whether it's showing the player organically via level design, cinematically through incredible storytelling, or instructionally through descriptive tutorials, every game should take those first 15 minutes to really show the player why the game is worth their time to keep them engaged, seeing it through to the very end. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you found something about this video interesting, and if you have any topics that you'd like to see me look into in the future, please let me know in the comments and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss it. And with that, I will see you in the next video. Bye!